The wine glass shattered against the hardwood floor with a crystalline crash that silenced every conversation in the room. Sarah Mitchell stood frozen in the archway between the kitchen and living room, her 3-month-old daughter Emma still crying in her arms, while her brother Derek's cruel laughter echoed off the Christmas-decorated walls. If you're enjoying this story, please like and subscribe for more incredible tales. What did you just say? Sarah's voice came out as barely a whisper, but the venom in it cut through the festive atmosphere like a blade through silk. Derek lounged back in their father's old recliner, his beer bottle dangling carelessly from his fingers, that familiar smirk plastered across his face, the same expression that had tormented her throughout their childhood. "I said your little mistake there sounds like a dying cat. Maybe you should have thought twice before keeping it." He gestured dismissively at Emma, whose cries had intensified. "Though I guess your mysterious husband was too busy with whatever bullshit job he pretends to have to give you any real advice." The blood drained from Sarah's face. Around the room, her extended family had gone completely silent. Aunt Martha's hand flew to her mouth. Uncle Bill set down his eggnog with a sharp clink. Even their mother, Patricia, who had been bustling around the kitchen moments before, appeared in the doorway with flour still dusting her apron. "Derek, that's enough," their father, Robert, said sharply from his position by the fireplace, but Derek waved him off. "Oh, come on, Dad. We're all thinking it." Sarah shows up here after 3 years of barely calling, with a baby and some phantom husband who's conveniently, quote, traveling for work every time there's a family gathering. It's Christmas, for Christ's sake, and where is he? What kind of man abandons his wife and newborn for the holidays? Sarah felt the familiar burn of tears threatening to spill, the same helpless rage she'd felt as a child when Derek would systematically destroy her toys, tear up her homework, or convince other kids not to play with her. But this time was different. This time, he wasn't just attacking her. He was attacking Emma, her beautiful, innocent daughter, who had done nothing wrong except be born into a complicated situation. "You don't know anything about my life," Sarah managed, bouncing Emma gently, trying to soothe her daughter's distress. "I know enough." Derek took another swig of his beer. "I know you got pregnant by some loser who won't even show his face around your own family. I know you're living in that tiny apartment downtown, working part-time at some bookstore because Mommy and Daddy keep sending you money. And I know that baby is going to grow up just as screwed up as—" "That's my daughter you're talking about." The voice came from the front hallway, calm and measured, but carrying an undertone of steel that made everyone in the room turn toward the sound. Sarah's heart skipped as a tall figure stepped into the living room, snowflakes still melting on the shoulders of his dark wool coat. Marcus Chen moved with the fluid grace of someone completely comfortable in his own skin, his dark eyes taking in the scene with the kind of analytical precision that Sarah had learned to recognize over their 2 years of marriage. Derek's smirk faltered slightly. "And you are?" Marcus removed his coat with deliberate care, hanging it on the wooden coat tree by the door, before walking directly to Sarah. He kissed her cheek softly, his presence immediately calming Emma's cries, then turned to face Derek with the same measuring look he might give a potentially dangerous situation. "I'm Marcus Chen," he said simply, "Sarah's husband, Emma's father. Creating these detailed stories takes tremendous effort. If you're enjoying this journey, please like, share, and subscribe for more epic tales." Derek straightened in the recliner, his earlier bravado wavering as he took in Marcus's composed demeanor. There was something about Sarah's husband that didn't quite fit with Derek's mental image of the loser he'd been picturing. Marcus wore a simple black sweater and dark jeans, nothing flashy or expensive, but he carried himself with an authority that made the room feel smaller. "Well, well," Derek said, forcing his smirk back into place. "The phantom finally appears. What's your excuse for missing Thanksgiving? Or Emma's baptism? Or—" "I was working," Marcus interrupted quietly. His voice held no defensiveness, just a statement of fact. "What kind of work keeps a man away from his family for months at a time?" Derek pressed, encouraged by what he perceived as weakness. "Let me guess. Traveling salesman? Truck driver? Or maybe something a little less legitimate?" Sarah felt Marcus's hand settle gently on her lower back, a reassuring touch that somehow conveyed both support and restraint. She knew that gesture well. It meant he was choosing his words very carefully. I work in after the first explanation. Just use his work, Marcus said. International affairs. The schedule can be unpredictable. After the first explanation, just use his work. Derek's tone dripped with skepticism. That's pretty vague, don't you think? I mean, if you're working for the government, you should be able to tell your own family what you do, right? The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Sarah watched her father's face carefully. Robert Mitchell had spent 30 years in the Navy before retiring to run his small accounting firm, and she could see him reading something in Marcus's bearing that Derek was completely missing. Some work requires discretion, Marcus replied evenly. Discretion, Derek laughed, but it sounded forced now. That's a fancy word for lying to your wife about. Derek, their father's voice cut across the room like a command. That's enough. But Derek was on a roll now, emboldened by what he saw as his moment to expose his sister's supposedly pathetic life choices. He stood up from the recliner, swaying slightly. Sarah noticed he'd clearly had more than one beer. No, Dad, I think we deserve some answers. Sarah shows up here with a baby, claims she's married to some mysterious guy who's never around, and now he waltzes in here on Christmas Day with some bullshit story about after the first explanation, just use his work, and international affairs. I call bullshit. Emma had quieted in Sarah's arms, but Sarah could feel her daughter's tiny body tensing with the family's stress. She looked around the room at her relatives' faces, her mother wringing her hands by the kitchen doorway, her aunt and uncle exchanging uncomfortable glances, her cousins filming everything discreetly with their phones. What kind of proof do you want, Derek? Sarah asked tiredly. A marriage certificate? Emma's birth certificate with both our names on it? Would that satisfy you? I want to know what he really does for a living, Derek shot back. I want to know why he can't be bothered to show up for his own daughter's important moments. I want to know what kind of man. The kind of man, Marcus said quietly, who has spent the last 4 months in Eastern Europe, preventing a weapons trafficking ring from acquiring materials that could be used to build dirty bombs in American cities. The room went dead silent, except for the crackling of the fireplace, and the soft, instrumental Christmas music playing from the kitchen radio. Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Marcus continued in the same calm tone, as if he were discussing the weather. The kind of man who missed his daughter's baptism, because he was coordinating with Interpol to track down the financial networks funding terrorist cells across 3 continents. The kind of man who couldn't come home for Thanksgiving because he was gathering intelligence on a human trafficking operation that resulted in the rescue of 47 women and children. Sarah stared at her husband in shock. In their 2 years of marriage, Marcus had never shared this level of detail about his work. She'd known he worked for some kind of government agency. The long absences, the encrypted phone calls, the way he never talked about specific cases, all pointed to classified work. But this was far more than she'd ever imagined. The kind of man, Marcus finished, his dark eyes never leaving Derek's face, who loves his wife and daughter enough to do a job that keeps them safe, even when it means missing the moments he'd rather be here for. Derek's face had gone from flushed to pale. You're saying you're like CIA or something? Marcus didn't answer directly. Instead, he moved to the couch and sat down, patting the cushion beside him, an invitation to Sarah. She settled next to him, Emma finally fully calm in her arms, and watched as Marcus rolled up his sleeves with practiced efficiency. The scars were visible now, thin white lines across his forearms that Sarah had always wondered about but never pressed him to explain. A particularly prominent one ran from his left wrist almost to his elbow. Shrapnel, Marcus said simply, noticing the direction of everyone's stares. Sarajevo 2019. A meet went bad. He looked directly at Derek. The kind of thing that happens when you work in, after the first explanation, just use his work. Patricia Mitchell finally found her voice. Marcus, dear, are you saying you work for the CIA? Marcus looked at Sarah before answering, a question in his eyes. She gave an almost imperceptible nod. After Derek's attack on Emma, she was done protecting her family from uncomfortable truths. I'm a handler, Marcus said. I recruit and manage human intelligence assets in hostile territories, people who risk their lives to provide information that keeps Americans safe. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. The reason I can tell you this now is because I'm being reassigned to domestic operations. No more extended overseas deployments. No more missing family gatherings." The silence stretched for what felt like minutes. Uncle Bill cleared his throat awkwardly. Aunt Martha was staring at Marcus like he'd grown a second head. The cousins had stopped recording and were looking genuinely nervous. Derek, meanwhile, had sunk back into the recliner, all his earlier bravado completely deflated. Shit, man, I didn't know." "No," Marcus agreed quietly. "You didn't. But you decided to attack my wife and daughter based on your assumptions, rather than asking questions or showing basic respect." Sarah felt a surge of protective love for her husband. This was why she'd fallen for him. Not just his strength or his intelligence, but his unwavering loyalty to the people he cared about. Even now, facing down her family's judgment and Derek's hostility, he wasn't backing down from defending her and Emma. "Derek," their father said firmly, "I think you owe your sister and her husband an apology." But Derek was staring at Marcus with a mixture of awe and lingering skepticism. "Prove it," he said suddenly. "If you're really CIA, prove it." "Derek," their mother gasped. Marcus studied Derek for a long moment, then reached into his back pocket and pulled out his wallet. From it he extracted what looked like a standard government ID card and held it out. Derek leaned forward, squinting at the credentials. Sarah couldn't see the details from her angle, but she watched her brother's face go through several emotions. Surprise, confusion, and finally something that might have been respect. "Holy shit," Derek breathed, then immediately looked apologetic. "Sorry, Mom, holy cow, this is real?" "It's real," Marcus confirmed, putting the ID away. "And Derek, the next time you want to question someone's commitment to their family, you might want to consider whether you have any idea what they've sacrificed to keep that family safe." Sarah felt Emma stir in her arms and looked down to see her daughter's dark eyes, so much like Marcus's, gazing up at her with perfect trust. The contrast between Emma's innocent face and the revelation of what her father did for a living struck Sarah with an almost physical force. "Marcus," she said softly, "why didn't you ever tell me the details before?" He turned to her, his expression gentling immediately. "Operational security. The less you knew about specific missions, the safer you were." His hand found hers and squeezed gently. "But things are changing. My new assignment will be coordinating with FBI counterintelligence operations domestically. I'll still travel, but mostly within the United States, and rarely for more than a week at a time." "You mean you'll be home for birthdays?" Sarah asked, hardly daring to hope. "I'll be home for birthdays, and Christmas, and all the little moments I've been missing." Marcus's voice carried a note of something that might have been regret. "I know it's been hard on you, Sarah. Raising Emma mostly alone, dealing with questions from your family, wondering if I was ever going to be the husband and father you both deserve." Around the room, Sarah's family was exchanging glances, clearly processing this dramatic shift in their understanding of the situation. Her father had moved closer, his military bearing more pronounced as he studied Marcus with new respect. "Son," Robert said finally, "I owe you an apology. We all do. We made assumptions about your character based on limited information." "With respect, sir," Marcus replied, "your concerns were valid. A man should be present for his family. The fact that I had good reasons for my absences doesn't change the impact on Sarah and Emma." Derek shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Look, Marcus, I'm sorry about what I said. About Emma, especially. That was way out of line." "Yes, it was," Marcus agreed, his tone cooling slightly. "Emma is an innocent child. Whatever issues you might have with Sarah or with me, she should be off limits." "You're right, I've been worried about Sarah, you know? She seems so isolated, struggling to make ends meet, and I thought—" "You thought I was a deadbeat who'd abandoned my responsibilities," Marcus finished. "I understand the logic. But Derek, the next time you're worried about your sister, maybe try asking her if she needs help, instead of attacking her choices at a family gathering." Sarah watched the exchange with fascination. She'd never seen anyone handle Derek quite like this. Not confrontational enough to escalate into a full argument, but firm enough to make his points stick. Her brother, who had bullied her throughout their childhood and continued his pattern of casual cruelty well into adulthood, actually looked chastened. Can I hold her?" Derek asked suddenly, nodding toward Emma. I've never actually held my niece. Sarah hesitated. Emma was finally peaceful, and Derek's behavior earlier had been so hostile. It's up to you, Marcus said quietly. But if you're going to hold her, you need to understand something first. That little girl is the most important thing in the world to both of us. She's not a prop for your guilt, or a way to make yourself feel better about tonight. She's a person who deserves to be treated with love and respect. Derek nodded soberly. I understand. Sarah looked at her daughter's calm face, then at her brother's genuinely remorseful expression. Wash your hands first, she said finally. And if she starts crying, you give her back immediately. As Derek headed to the kitchen sink, Patricia finally approached the couch, wringing her hands nervously. Marcus, dear, I have to ask, is this dangerous? Your work, I mean. Should we be worried about Sarah and Emma's safety? It was a fair question, one that Sarah had wondered about herself during the long nights when Marcus was away and she'd hear strange sounds outside their apartment. There are always risks in intelligence work, Marcus said honestly, but my cover has been solid for 7 years. As far as anyone in the field knows, I'm a mid-level diplomat specializing in trade relations. The people I've worked against have no idea who I really am or where I live. But what about now? Robert asked, settling into a nearby chair. If you're transitioning to domestic operations, won't that change things? Marcus's expression grew more serious. Potentially. Counterintelligence work involves dealing with hostile actors who are already operating within the United States. Foreign agents, domestic extremist groups, cybercriminals working for foreign governments. The threats are different, but the risk level isn't necessarily higher. Derek returned from washing his hands, moving more carefully than Sarah had ever seen him. She stood and gently transferred Emma to her brother's arms, watching nervously as he adjusted his hold. She's so small, Derek said wonderingly, his voice softer than it had been all evening. Emma looked up at him with the same trusting expression she gave everyone, her tiny hand grasping reflexively at his finger. God, Sarah, she's beautiful. She looks like Marcus, Sarah said, settling back down next to her husband. She has your nose, Marcus disagreed, his hand coming to rest on Sarah's knee. And your stubborn streak, I suspect. How can you tell a 3-month-old is stubborn? Uncle Bill asked from across the room, clearly trying to lighten the atmosphere. She refuses to sleep through the night unless Sarah is holding her, Marcus explained with a slight smile. And she has very specific opinions about which lullabies are acceptable. It was such a normal parental thing to say that Sarah felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. Despite everything, the revelations about Marcus's work, Derek's cruel comments, the family drama, they were still just parents talking about their baby. Does she know you? Aunt Martha asked hesitantly. I mean, with you being away so much. Sarah felt Marcus tense slightly beside her, and she knew the question had hit a sensitive spot. This was one of her own fears, that Emma wouldn't bond properly with Marcus because of his frequent absences. She knows me, Marcus said quietly. We video call every day when I'm away. And when I'm home, he trailed off, seeming to search for words. When he's home, he barely puts her down, Sarah finished for him. He gets up for the night feedings, changes every diaper, gives her baths. It's like he's trying to make up for lost time. Because I am, Marcus said simply. Every day I'm away from her is a day I can't get back. So when I'm here, I try to be completely present. Derek looked up from Emma's face, his expression thoughtful. That must be hard, the traveling, I mean. Missing so much. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, Marcus admitted, but it's also necessary. The work we do, it prevents attacks that could kill thousands of people. It stops weapons from reaching terrorist cells. It saves lives. Is that why you do it? Patricia asked. A sense of duty? Marcus considered the question carefully. Partly, but mostly because I'm good at it, and because someone has to do it. I speak 4 languages fluently, I understand how criminal networks operate, and I can read people well enough to know when they're lying or when they're trustworthy. He paused. And because I want Emma to grow up in a world where she's safe. What languages? Derek asked, clearly fascinated despite himself. Mandarin, Arabic, Russian, and Spanish, plus enough French and German to get by, Marcus replied. Languages are tools in this business. They let you blend in, build trust, understand conversations that aren't meant for you. Sarah stared at her husband with new eyes. She'd known he was intelligent, had suspected his work was more complex than he let on, but the scope of his capabilities was becoming clear for the first time. This wasn't just a man with a secretive job. This was someone operating at a level she'd never fully grasped. How long have you been doing this? Her father asked. 12 years total, 7 as a handler. Marcus's gaze swept the room. I started right out of college. MIT, Computer Science and International Relations double major. The agency recruited me during my senior year. MIT? Derek's eyebrows shot up. Jesus, Sarah, you didn't mention your husband was a genius. I'm not a genius, Marcus said mildly. I just have a good memory and a talent for understanding systems, whether they're computer networks or human behavior patterns. Emma had fallen asleep in Derek's arms, her tiny features relaxed and peaceful. Derek was gazing down at her with an expression Sarah had never seen on her brother's face before, something between wonder and protectiveness. She's perfect, Derek said softly. Then he looked up at Sarah, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Sarah, I'm so sorry. About everything I said tonight, but also about how I've treated you over the years. You didn't deserve any of it, and Emma sure as hell didn't deserve to hear it. Sarah felt her own tears threatening. Derek. No, let me finish. Derek's voice was thick with emotion. I've been jealous of you since we were kids. You were always smarter, more creative, more everything. Mom and Dad were so proud of your writing, your grades, your scholarships, and I dealt with it by tearing you down every chance I got. Around the room, their family watched this unexpected moment of honesty with rapt attention. Their mother had tears streaming down her cheeks. When you moved away after college and barely called, I told myself it was because you thought you were too good for us, Derek continued. But the truth is, I drove you away. I made family gatherings miserable for you, and then I resented you for not wanting to come around. Derek, you don't have to. Yeah, I do. Derek looked down at Emma again, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Looking at her, thinking about how I talked about her tonight. God, Sarah, what kind of person says those things about a baby? About his own niece? Marcus spoke up quietly. The kind of person who's in pain and doesn't know how to deal with it constructively, but also the kind of person who can recognize his mistakes and choose to do better. Derek looked at Marcus with something approaching gratitude. Is that your professional opinion, Agent Chen? That's my opinion as someone who's seen a lot of people at their worst moments, Marcus replied. People aren't defined by their worst moments, Derek. They're defined by what they do after those moments. Sarah felt a profound shift in the room's atmosphere. The tension that had characterized her family gatherings for years was dissolving, replaced by something she'd almost forgotten was possible. Genuine connection. Can I ask you something, Marcus? She said suddenly. Anything. When we met, when we started dating, did you tell your superiors about me? Did they investigate me? Marcus's jaw tightened slightly. They did a standard background check when things got serious between us. It's protocol for anyone in my position. What did they find? That you're exactly who you appear to be. A talented writer, a good person, someone with no connections to hostile foreign governments or extremist organizations. Marcus's tone grew warmer. They also found that you have excellent instincts about people and situations, which is why you never pushed too hard when I couldn't give you details about my work. Did they approve of me? Sarah asked, half joking but also genuinely curious. They said I was lucky to find someone who could handle the lifestyle, Marcus replied seriously. Not everyone can be married to someone in this field. The secrecy, the unpredictable schedule, the constant worry. It takes a special kind of strength. Patricia stepped forward, reaching out to touch Marcus's shoulder gently. Son, I want you to know that we're proud to have you in our family. What you do, the sacrifices you make, we may not fully understand it, but we respect it. Thank you, Mrs. Mitchell. That means more than you know. Robert cleared his throat. Marcus, I have to ask, and stop me if this is classified, but have you ever been in a situation where you thought you might not make it home? The question hung in the air like smoke. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat as she waited for Marcus's answer, suddenly realizing there were aspects of his work she'd never allowed herself to fully consider. "Yes," Marcus said simply, "more than once." "What kept you going?" Robert pressed gently. Marcus looked at Sarah, then down at Emma, sleeping peacefully in Derek's arms. "The thought of coming home to them. The knowledge that Sarah was waiting for me, that Emma needed her father, that I had a family worth fighting to get back to." Sarah felt the tears she'd been holding back finally break free. All the lonely nights, all the worry, all the times she'd wondered if she'd made the right choice marrying someone whose job she couldn't fully understand. It all crystallized into this moment of absolute clarity about why their relationship worked despite everything. "I love you," she whispered, not caring that her entire family was watching. "I love you too," Marcus replied, pulling her close. "Both of you. More than any mission, more than any job, you're my priority now." Derek carefully stood up, cradling Emma with surprising gentleness. "I think someone needs to go back to her parents," he said softly, crossing to the couch. As Sarah took her daughter back, Emma's eyes fluttered open briefly. She gazed up at her mother with that perfect trust that never failed to take Sarah's breath away, then settled back into sleep with a contented sigh. "She's going to have quite a story to tell when she's older," Aunt Martha observed. "My daddy works for the CIA." "She'll never be able to tell that story," Marcus said with a slight smile. "Operational security, remember? As far as the world is concerned, Daddy works in. After the first explanation, just use his work." "But we know the truth now," Patricia said firmly. "And we're proud of all of you. Proud of the work you do, Marcus, and proud of Sarah for being strong enough to support you in it." The conversation continued for another hour, with family members asking careful questions about Marcus's work and sharing their own stories and updates. But Sarah found herself only half listening, too focused on the warmth of her husband's arm around her shoulders and the peaceful weight of her daughter in her arms. This was what she'd been missing during all those lonely months, not just Marcus's physical presence, but the knowledge that her family understood and accepted their situation. Derek's cruel comments had forced Marcus to reveal more than he'd ever intended to share, but in doing so, he'd given Sarah something she hadn't realized she desperately needed: the ability to be completely honest about her life. As the evening wound down and family members began preparing to leave, Derek approached the couch one final time. "Sarah, can I talk to you for a minute, privately?" Sarah looked at Marcus, who nodded and took Emma. "We'll be right here," he assured her. Derek led her to the kitchen, where their mother was washing dishes with unusual intensity, clearly processing the evening's revelations. "I meant what I said earlier," Derek began, "about being sorry, but I also wanted to ask, what can I do to make things right between us?" Sarah studied her brother's face, looking for any trace of the manipulative behavior that had characterized their relationship for so long, but all she saw was genuine remorse and a desire to repair the damage he'd done. "Start by treating Emma like the precious gift she is," Sarah said finally. "She's gonna grow up hearing stories about her Uncle Derek. I want those to be good stories." "They will be, I promise." Derek glanced toward the living room, where Marcus was gently bouncing Emma while talking quietly with their father. "He's a good man, Sarah. I can see why you love him." "He is. And Derek, the next time you have concerns about my life or my choices, talk to me directly. Don't attack me in front of the whole family." "Deal." Derek hesitated, then pulled Sarah into an awkward but sincere hug. "I've missed you, sis. I've missed having you in my life." "I've missed you too," Sarah admitted, surprised to realize it was true. "The good parts of you anyway." When they returned to the living room, they found Marcus showing Emma's tiny hand to Robert, who was marveling at her miniature fingernails. "She's going to be tall," Robert predicted. "Look at those long fingers." "She gets that from Marcus," Sarah said, settling back beside her husband. "Everything about her seems to come from Marcus, actually." "She has your determination," Marcus disagreed. "Yesterday she spent 20 minutes trying to grab a toy that was just out of reach. She never gave up, just kept trying different approaches until she figured it out." "She's 3 months old, Marcus. I don't think that counts as determination." You'd be surprised how early personality traits show up, Marcus said seriously. I've learned to read people pretty quickly in my line of work, and Emma definitely has your stubborn streak. The family began their final goodbyes, with hugs and promises to stay in better touch. Derek lingered the longest, clearly reluctant to end this new, more honest dynamic. Will you bring Emma by more often? He asked Sarah. I'd like to get to know my niece properly. If you promise to behave yourself, Sarah replied with a small smile. I promise. And Marcus? Derek turned to Sarah's husband. Thank you for everything you do, and for putting up with my bullshit tonight. Just remember what we talked about, Marcus said, shaking Derek's hand firmly. Emma's off limits for any future family drama. Absolutely, she's got the coolest dad in the world. Why would I give her grief about that? As the house finally emptied except for Sarah's parents, Patricia approached the couch with a plate of Christmas cookies. For the road, she explained. And Marcus, you're welcome here anytime, with or without notice. This is your home now too. Thank you, Mrs. Mitchell. That means everything to Sarah, which means everything to me. Robert clapped Marcus on the shoulder. Son, I served 30 years in the Navy. I understand duty, sacrifice, and the weight of classified responsibilities. If you ever need to talk to someone who gets it, you know where to find me. Marcus nodded gratefully. I appreciate that, sir, more than you know. As they gathered their things to leave, Sarah realized that Emma had slept through most of the evening's drama, blissfully unaware that her father's revelation had fundamentally changed the family dynamics. But she would grow up in a world where her extended family understood and respected her parents' choices, where her Uncle Derek would hopefully be a positive presence rather than a source of conflict. Ready to go home? Marcus asked, helping Sarah into her coat while balancing Emma's carrier. More than ready, Sarah replied. But as they walked toward the door, she felt lighter than she had in months. Home wasn't just their apartment anymore. It was wherever the three of them were together, supported by family who finally understood the full picture of their lives. The snow was falling steadily as they loaded Emma into the car, creating a perfect Christmas card scene. But as Marcus started the engine and reached for Sarah's hand, she knew their real life was far more complex and beautiful than any picture could capture. So she said as they pulled out of her parents' driveway, CIA handler, that's quite a career change from what I thought you did. Marcus laughed, the first truly relaxed sound she'd heard from him all evening. What did you think I did? Honestly? I figured you were some kind of corporate spy. Industrial espionage, maybe. Something that required travel and secrecy, but wasn't quite as dramatic as what you actually do. Is it too dramatic, now that you know the truth? Sarah considered the question seriously as they drove through the snowy streets toward home. It's scary, she admitted. Knowing that you're dealing with actual dangerous people, that there's real risk involved. But it's also, I'm proud of you, Marcus. Proud of the work you do, the difference you make. Even if it means more time apart, even if Emma grows up with a father who can't always tell her where he's been or what he's been doing. Even then, Sarah squeezed his hand. She'll understand eventually. And in the meantime, she'll know she has a father who loves her enough to make the world safer for her. They drove in comfortable silence for a while, Emma sleeping peacefully in her car seat, the Christmas lights of their neighborhood creating a warm glow through the falling snow. It had been a night of revelations and confrontations, but it had also been a night of healing and new beginnings. As they pulled into their apartment complex's parking lot, Marcus turned to Sarah with a serious expression. There's something else we need to talk about, he said quietly, about my new assignment. Sarah felt a flutter of anxiety. What about it? It's based here in the city, which means I'll be home most nights. But it also means there might be times when we need to take extra security precautions. Background checks on anyone who spends significant time around Emma, awareness of our surroundings, that kind of thing. How extra is extra? Sarah asked. Probably not much different from what we already do, just more conscious about it. The main thing is that Emma can never be left alone with people we haven't vetted, and we'll need to be more careful about our online presence. Sarah nodded slowly. It seemed like a small price to pay for having Marcus home regularly. Anything else? Just that I love you, Marcus said, leaning over to kiss her gently. And I'm sorry about tonight. About Derek. About having to reveal so much in front of your family. About all of it. Don't be sorry, tonight was exactly what we needed. Sarah looked back at their sleeping daughter, then at her husband's concerned face. For the first time since Emma was born, I feel like we're a complete family, not just the three of us, but connected to something bigger. Marcus followed her gaze to Emma, his expression softening. She's going to have quite a life, isn't she? The best life we can give her, Sarah agreed, full of love, honesty, and the knowledge that her parents will do anything to keep her safe. As they carried their sleeping daughter up the stairs to their apartment, Sarah felt a sense of completion she hadn't experienced in months. The evening had been difficult and emotional, but it had also been transformative. For the first time since Emma's birth, she felt like they were truly moving forward as a family unit, with the full support and understanding of her extended family. 3 weeks later, if something goes wrong, we'll have better security. She discovered this on a Tuesday morning when she opened their apartment door to find a woman in a crisp, black suit standing in the hallway, her hand poised to knock. "Mrs. Chen?" the woman asked politely. "I'm Agent Rebecca Torres, FBI. I wondered if I might have a word with you about your husband's work." Sarah's blood went cold. Emma was napping in her crib, and Sarah had been looking forward to a quiet morning of writing while her daughter slept. The last thing she'd expected was a federal agent at her door. "Is Marcus in trouble?" Sarah asked, her hand tightening on the doorknob. "Not at all. May I come in? This concerns his new assignment and some security protocols we need to discuss." Reluctantly, Sarah stepped aside to let Agent Torres enter. The woman was probably in her 30s. With short, dark hair and the kind of alert, measuring gaze that Sarah was beginning to recognize as characteristic of people in Marcus's field. "Coffee?" Sarah offered automatically, then felt foolish. Did FBI agents drink coffee during official visits? That would be lovely, thank you. Torres settled onto the couch and pulled out a slim tablet. "I should start by saying that Marcus speaks very highly of you. He's mentioned your discretion and your ability to handle the unique pressures of being married to someone in intelligence work." Sarah busied herself with the coffee maker, trying to process this unexpected development. "He's never mentioned you. We only met last week when he started working with our joint task force. But his reputation precedes him. Marcus has an exceptional record in human intelligence, and we're fortunate to have him consulting on domestic operations." "Consulting?" Sarah brought 2 mugs to the living room and sat down across from Torres. "I thought he was being reassigned permanently." Torres's expression grew more serious. "His primary assignment is with us, yes. But the agency has asked him to maintain some of his international contacts. People he's developed over the years who provide valuable intelligence on foreign operations that could affect domestic security." Sarah felt a familiar sinking sensation in her stomach, meaning he'll still travel. "Occasionally, but nothing like his previous schedule. We're talking about short trips, usually no more than 3 or 4 days, maybe once a month." It was better than the months-long deployments Marcus had been doing before, but Sarah couldn't help feeling disappointed. She'd been looking forward to the stability of having him home consistently. "Why are you telling me this instead of Marcus?" Sarah asked. "Because we need to discuss some security measures that will affect your daily routine," Torres replied. "And frankly, because it's important for spouses to understand the full scope of what their partners are involved in." Sarah nodded, thinking of her conversation with Marcus on Christmas night. "What kind of security measures?" Torres consulted her tablet. "Nothing too intrusive. We'll need to install some additional monitoring equipment in the apartment. Cameras for the common areas, sensors for the doors and windows. You'll have a direct line to our operations center that you can use if you ever feel unsafe or notice anything unusual." "What counts as unusual?" "People watching the building, following you when you're out with Emma, anyone asking detailed questions about Marcus's work or schedule. Unmarked vehicles parked on your street for extended periods. Phone calls where no one speaks when you answer." Sarah set down her coffee mug with shaking hands. "Has something specific happened? Is there a threat?" "No specific threat," Torres assured her quickly. "But Marcus's work over the years has put him in contact with some very dangerous people. Most of them have no idea who he really is or where he lives, but we believe in being proactive about security." A soft cry from the bedroom indicated that Emma was waking up from her nap. Sarah excused herself and returned a few minutes later with her daughter, who was blinking sleepily and looking curiously at the stranger in their living room. "She's beautiful," Torres said with a genuine smile. "How old?" 3.5 months. Sarah settled Emma on her lap, grateful for the familiar weight and warmth of her daughter. "Agent Torres, can I ask you something directly?" "Of course." "Are we in danger, not theoretically, not as a general security precaution, but right now, today, are my daughter and I in danger because of Marcus's work?" Torres was quiet for a long moment, studying Emma's face. When she spoke, her voice was careful and measured. "There's an ongoing situation that we're monitoring. A network of individuals who have been targeting American intelligence assets and their families. They haven't made any moves against anyone in Marcus's position yet, but the pattern suggests they might be building towards something." Sarah's arms tightened instinctively around Emma. "What kind of moves?" "Surveillance, mostly. Following spouses, photographing children, mapping daily routines, the kind of intelligence gathering that could precede an attempt at leverage or intimidation." Leverage meaning threatening family members to force cooperation or to extract information. Torres leaned forward slightly. "Sarah, I want to be clear. We have no indication that you or Emma are being targeted specifically, but Marcus's profile makes him a potential person of interest for this network." Emma had begun to fuss, picking up on Sarah's tension. Sarah bounced her gently while trying to process what she was hearing. "Does Marcus know about this? About the network?" "He's been briefed, yes, but he may not have shared all the details because he doesn't want to worry you unnecessarily." Sarah felt a flash of irritation. "Don't you think that should be my choice, whether or not to worry about threats to my family?" "Absolutely, which is why I'm here." Torres's tone was matter-of-fact. "From now on, you'll receive the same security briefings Marcus does. Any threats, any changes in the situation, any new precautions. You'll know about them as soon as we do." It was both reassuring and terrifying. Sarah had wanted more honesty about Marcus's work, but she was beginning to understand why he'd been so careful about what he shared. "What do I need to do differently?" Sarah asked. Torres pulled up another screen on her tablet. "Vary your routines. Don't go to the same coffee shop at the same time every day. Don't take the same route when you're walking with Emma. Be aware of your surroundings. If you see the same person in multiple locations, or if someone seems to be paying unusual attention to you, call the number I'm going to give you." "What about Emma's pediatrician appointments? Her daycare when I go back to work?" "We'll coordinate with both. The pediatrician's office will implement some additional security protocols, and we'll need to vet anyone who will be caring for Emma regularly." Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. "Marcus, how's your morning going? Emma being good?" Without thinking, Sarah held up the phone to show Torres. "Should I tell him you're here?" "He knows I was coming. We scheduled this conversation together." Sarah stared at Torres, then typed back, "Fine. Having an interesting chat with Agent Torres." Her phone rang immediately. "Hi," Marcus's voice was tense. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine." She's explaining about the security measures. "Good. I wanted to be there for that conversation, but I got called into an emergency briefing." Marcus paused. "Sarah, I know this is a lot to take in." "It is, but I'd rather know than wonder." Sarah looked at Torres, who was discreetly checking her own phone. "When will you be home?" "Late tonight, probably. There's been a development in one of our cases." Another pause. "Can we talk about everything when I get back? Really talk, I mean, about what this all means for us." "Yes, I love you. I love you too, both of you." After Sarah hung up, Torres continued with her security briefing, covering everything from new locks for the apartment to emergency protocols if Sarah ever felt threatened. By the time the agent left, Sarah's head was spinning with information, and Emma was ready for another feeding. As she settled into the nursing chair by the window, Sarah found herself looking at the street below with new eyes. Was that man walking his dog actually walking his dog? Or was he surveilling their building? Had that car been parked there this morning, or was it new? "This is your daddy's fault," she murmured to Emma, who was nursing contentedly. "He has the most complicated job in the world." Emma's only response was to grip Sarah's finger with her tiny hand, a gesture that never failed to remind Sarah of what was truly important. Whatever challenges Marcus's work presented, Whatever security measures they needed to implement, protecting their daughter was worth any inconvenience. The afternoon passed quietly, but Sarah found herself checking the locks twice and looking out the windows more often than usual. When Marcus finally came home just after 10 p.m., she practically launched herself into his arms. "Bad day?" he asked, holding her tightly. "Enlightening day." Torres explained about the network that's targeting intelligence families. Marcus's jaw tightened. "How much detail did she give you?" "Enough to understand why you've been more protective lately, enough to know that someone might be building files on American assets and their families." Sarah pulled back to look at his face. "Marcus, why didn't you tell me about this when it first came up?" "Because I hoped it would resolve itself before it became something you needed to worry about." Marcus sat heavily on the couch, exhaustion clear in every line of his body. "Because I wanted to give you a few weeks of normal family life before adding more stress. And now? Now the situation has escalated and you need to know everything." Marcus ran a hand through his hair. "Sarah, there's something else. Something Torres probably didn't mention because we're still confirming the details." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "What?" "We think someone has been watching our building, possibly for the past week." The room seemed to tilt slightly. Sarah sank down next to Marcus on the couch, her mind racing back over the past week. Had she noticed anything unusual? Any faces that appeared too often? Any cars that seemed out of place? What kind of watching? Standard surveillance patterns. Someone sitting in a car across the street for extended periods, then leaving and being replaced by someone else. A person with a camera photographing the building from different angles. Marcus's voice was calm, but Sarah could see the tension in his shoulders. "It could be unrelated to my work, developers looking at the building, insurance investigators, any number of legitimate reasons. But you don't think it's legitimate." "I think we need to assume it's not until we know for certain." Emma's cry from the bedroom interrupted their conversation. As Sarah went to check on their daughter, she found herself automatically glancing out the bedroom window at the street below. Everything looked normal, quiet, peaceful, the kind of neighborhood where young families felt safe raising their children. But appearances, Sarah was learning, could be deceptive. When she returned to the living room with Emma, Marcus was on his phone, speaking in low, urgent tones. She caught fragments, "Move up the timeline," and "Can't wait for confirmation." "What timeline?" Sarah asked when he hung up. "We're implementing the security upgrades tomorrow instead of next week. New locks, cameras, the direct line to FBI operations." Marcus reached for Emma, his expression softening as their daughter settled against his chest. "Torres will be back in the morning with a technical team. Is this going to be our life now, constantly looking over our shoulders, wondering if strangers are really strangers?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, gently patting Emma's back as she dozed against his shoulder. "I don't know," he said finally. "I hope not. But Sarah, I need you to understand something. I would rather err on the side of being overly cautious than risk anything happening to you or Emma." "I know, and I agree. It's just—" Sarah gestured helplessly around their cozy living room. "This morning I was worried about Emma's sleep schedule and whether I'd get any writing done. Tonight I'm learning about surveillance networks and wondering if someone's been photographing our building. I'm sorry. I know this isn't what you signed up for when you married me." Sarah studied her husband's face, the worry lines that seemed deeper than they had been a month ago, the way his eyes constantly moved toward the windows, the protective way he held Emma even when she was perfectly safe in their own home. "Actually," she said slowly, "it is what I signed up for. I may not have understood all the details, but I knew you did important work that came with risks. I knew our life would be different from other families, even if those risks extend to Emma?" It was the question that cut to the heart of everything. Sarah looked at her sleeping daughter, so small and vulnerable and trusting that her parents would keep her safe from a world she didn't yet understand. "Especially because those risks extend to Emma," Sarah said firmly. "Marcus, the work you do keeps children like her safe from people who would hurt them. If we have to deal with some inconvenience and security measures to protect her while you do that work, then that's what we'll do." Marcus's relief was visible. "You're sure? Because if this is too much, if you want me to request a transfer to something with lower risk—" "No." Sarah's voice was stronger than she felt. "You're good at what you do. You save lives. Emma will grow up, knowing her father makes the world safer for families like ours. Even if it means she grows up with security cameras in her home and agents vetting her babysitters. Even then, as long as she also grows up knowing she's loved and protected and valued for who she is. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, taking turns holding Emma and watching the quiet street through their living room window. It was nearly midnight when Marcus finally brought up the topic Sarah had been dreading. "There's one more thing we need to discuss," he said carefully. "About your family. What about them? After Christmas, after what I revealed about my work, they're going to want to stay in closer contact. More visits, more phone calls, more involvement in Emma's life." Sarah nodded. Since Christmas, her mother had called twice a week instead of twice a month, and Derek had stopped by the previous weekend just to bring Emma a stuffed animal. The attention was lovely, but she could see where Marcus was going with this. "They'll need to be briefed on basic security protocols," Marcus continued. "Nothing detailed, just awareness of the need for discretion about my work and some guidelines about social media posts involving Emma. You want to give my family a security briefing? Torres wants to give your family a security briefing, and honestly, Sarah, it's necessary. If someone is building a file on our family, they'll look at your parents, your brother, anyone who spends significant time with Emma." The idea of Agent Torres sitting in her parents' living room, explaining surveillance tactics and security protocols, was almost surreal, but Sarah could see the logic. "What will you tell them?" "The truth, that my work occasionally attracts unwanted attention, and we need their help keeping Emma safe." Marcus shifted Emma to his other arm as she stirred in her sleep. "Your father will understand immediately. Your mother might need more explanation, but she'll cooperate once she understands it's about Emma's safety. And Derek?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Derek will probably think it's the coolest thing ever, but he'll also take it seriously if we frame it right." Sarah couldn't help smiling slightly. Marcus was probably right. Derek would be fascinated by the idea of being involved, however peripherally, in intelligence security measures. "When?" "This weekend. Torres wants to brief all of them together, answer their questions, and set up some basic protocols." "Okay." Sarah took a deep breath. "Okay, we'll do it. But Marcus, after this, after the security upgrades and the family briefings and all of it, I want a few weeks of normal life. I want to take Emma to the park without wondering if someone's watching us. I want to go to the grocery store without checking to see if I'm being followed." After this, Marcus agreed, "we'll have better security and better awareness, which should actually make daily life feel more normal, not less." Sarah hoped he was right. As they prepared for bed, going through the usual routine of checking Emma's crib, setting up the baby monitor, and making sure all the doors were locked, she tried to imagine what normal would look like in their new reality. But when she woke up the next morning to the sound of drilling in their living room as Torres's technical team installed new security equipment, Sarah realized that normal was going to be redefined whether she was ready for it or not. "Good morning, Mrs. Chen," Torres called out cheerfully as Sarah emerged from the bedroom with Emma. "We're just about finished with the camera installation." Sarah looked around her living room, now equipped with small, discrete cameras in 2 corners and a new control panel by the front door. It looked exactly the same as it had the day before, except now, it also looked like the kind of place where people who live dangerous lives might feel safe. "How does it work?" Sarah asked, bouncing Emma gently as their daughter took in the unusual activity with wide, curious eyes. "Motion sensors, night vision capability, direct feed to our monitoring station, but you can also access everything from your phone." Torres handed Sarah a small device. "This will alert you if any of the sensors are triggered when you're not home, and you can view the camera feeds remotely." It was impressive technology, and Sarah found herself wondering how many other families in their city lived with similar setups. How many other wives were learning to check security cameras before opening their front doors? "The direct line to operations is here," Torres continued, indicating a small red button on the new control panel. "Press and hold for 3 seconds, and you'll be connected immediately to an agent who can dispatch help if needed." "What counts as needing help?" Sarah asked. "Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, call. We'd rather respond to a false alarm than miss a real threat." As the technical team packed up their equipment, Marcus arrived home with coffee and pastries from Sarah's favorite bakery. "Peace offering," he explained, kissing Sarah's cheek and taking Emma from her arms. "I know this is a lot of disruption." "It's fine. Actually, it's kind of reassuring." Sarah looked around their newly secured living room. "I feel safer knowing that if something does happen, help is just a button away." Torres overheard and nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the right attitude. The goal isn't to make you paranoid. It's to give you tools and awareness so you can live your life confidently." After Torres and her team left, Sarah and Marcus spent the morning testing the new systems and learning how to use the monitoring app. Emma seemed fascinated by the small red light on one of the cameras, reaching for it from Marcus's arms with determined baby focus. "She's going to grow up thinking every home has security cameras," Sarah observed. "She's going to grow up safe," Marcus replied firmly. "That's what matters." As if to prove his point, the new security panel chimed softly, and Marcus's phone buzzed with an alert. He checked the app and frowned. "What is it?" Sarah asked. "Motion sensor by the front door. But we're both here, so—" Marcus pulled up the camera feed on his phone, and they both saw a delivery driver placing a package by their door. "I didn't order anything," Sarah said. "Neither did I." Marcus was already moving toward the door, his body language shifting into the alert, controlled posture Sarah recognized from their first night. "Stay back with Emma." Sarah watched through the security camera feed as Marcus carefully opened the door and examined the package. After a few minutes, he brought it inside, a small box addressed to Sarah from her favorite online bookstore. "I did order something," Sarah realized with relief. "I completely forgot. It's a book about infant sleep patterns." Marcus relaxed visibly, but the incident had driven home how quickly their new normal could shift from routine to potentially dangerous. "This is going to take some getting used to," Sarah admitted. "For all of us," Marcus agreed, settling back onto the couch with Emma. "But Sarah, I need you to promise me something. If the system alerts you to anything when I'm not here, don't investigate it yourself. Call the operations center, wait for instructions. What if it's just another delivery? Then they'll confirm that and you'll know it's safe. But if it's something else—" Marcus's voice trailed off, but Sarah understood. If it was something else, she and Emma needed to be as far away from the front door as possible. The rest of the day passed quietly, but Sarah found herself hyper-aware of every sound in the hallway, every notification from the security app, every car that parked on their street for more than a few minutes. By evening, she was exhausted from the constant vigilance. "How do you do it?" she asked Marcus as they prepared dinner together. "The constant awareness, always being ready for something to go wrong?" "Training and experience," Marcus replied, chopping vegetables with practiced efficiency. "But also compartmentalization. You learn to be alert without being anxious, prepared without being paranoid." "I don't feel very good at compartmentalization." Marcus set down his knife and turned to face her fully. "Sarah, you've been doing this for one day. I've been doing it for 12 years. Give yourself time to adjust." Emma's cry from her bouncy seat interrupted their conversation, and Sarah went to check on her daughter. As she lifted Emma into her arms, she realized that her maternal instincts and the security training Torres had provided weren't so different. Both involved being aware of potential threats while still allowing for normal, happy family life. "Maybe I'm better at this than I think," she murmured to Emma, who responded with a gurgling sound that might have been agreement. If this story has moved you, please like and share it with others who love compelling narratives. The family security briefing took place the following Saturday in Sarah's parents' living room, the same space where Marcus had revealed his true profession 3 weeks earlier. But this time, the atmosphere was entirely different, focused and serious rather than festive and confrontational. Agent Torres had arrived with a leather portfolio and the kind of professional demeanor that immediately commanded attention. Sarah's parents sat on the couch, her mother's hands folded tightly in her lap, while Derek perched on the edge of the recliner with the intensity of someone receiving classified information. "Thank you all for making time for this," Torres began, settling into the chair Sarah's father had offered. "I want to start by emphasizing that there's no immediate threat to your family. However, Marcus's work requires that we take certain precautions to ensure everyone's safety. Robert leaned forward slightly. What kind of precautions? Primarily awareness and discretion. Marcus's work involves contact with individuals who might attempt to use family members as leverage if they discovered his true identity. Torres opened her portfolio and consulted a document. We need your help maintaining operational security. What does that mean in practical terms? Patricia asked, her voice tight with worry. Torres's expression softened slightly. It means being thoughtful about what you share on social media, particularly anything involving Emma. No posting photos that show identifying details like your address, license plates, or specific locations. No sharing information about Marcus's travel schedule or work details. Derek raised his hand like he was in school. What about just saying he works for the government? People already know that much. That's fine, but nothing more specific. And if anyone, friends, neighbors, strangers, starts asking detailed questions about Marcus's job or schedule, we need to know about it immediately. Sarah watched her family absorb this information, seeing the reality of Marcus's world sink in for them, just as it had for her over the past week. Her mother looked worried, her father thoughtful, and Derek fascinated. Has something specific happened? Robert asked. Some kind of threat? Torres hesitated for just a moment, long enough for Sarah to realize there was information she wasn't sharing. We're monitoring a situation involving individuals who target American intelligence assets. As a precaution, we're briefing all families of personnel who might be of interest. How big is this situation? Derek pressed. Like, how many families are involved? I can't share specific numbers, but it's significant enough to warrant these security protocols. Sarah felt Marcus tense beside her. She was beginning to read his reactions well enough to know when something was bothering him, and Torres's carefully neutral responses were clearly not telling the whole story. Pal. Agent Torres, Sarah said quietly. Is there something else we should know? Something more immediate than general precautions? Torres looked at Marcus, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. There was an incident yesterday, Torres said carefully. Nothing involving your family directly, but it escalated our concern level. What kind of incident? Patricia's voice was sharp with maternal anxiety. The family of another intelligence asset was approached by someone claiming to be conducting a survey about neighborhood security. The person asked specific questions about family schedules, security systems, and whether anyone in the household worked for the government. The room went completely silent, except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Sarah felt Emma shift in her arms and realized she'd been holding her daughter too tightly. And? Robert prompted. The family recognized the questions as suspicious and reported them immediately. When we investigated, we discovered the surveyor had approached 4 other families in the same neighborhood, all connected to intelligence personnel. Derek leaned back in his chair. So someone's definitely targeting intelligence families. Someone is gathering information on intelligence families, Torres corrected. We don't yet know their intent, but we're treating it as a potential threat. Marcus spoke up for the first time since the briefing began, which is why we need your help. If anyone approaches you with questions about our family, about my work, about Emma's schedule, anything that seems like more than casual conversation, call us immediately. What should we say if someone asks about you? Patricia wanted to know. The truth, as far as you know it. I work in, after the first explanation, just use his work. I travel occasionally. I have a wife and baby daughter. But nothing about agencies, nothing about specific locations, and definitely nothing about security measures. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it automatically, then looked more closely. Marcus, she said quietly, holding out the phone. The message was from an unknown number. Beautiful family. Emma is growing so fast. Marcus's face went completely still as he read the message. Torres was already reaching for her own phone. When did this come in? Torres asked. Just now, about 30 seconds ago. Torres was typing rapidly on her phone. We need to trace this number immediately. Does anyone else have access to your phone? Anyone who might know Emma's name and could be playing a prank? Sarah's mind raced through the possibilities. No one. I mean, family members know Emma's name, obviously, but they all have my number already. And my friends from work, but she trailed off, realizing how few people actually had her current phone number. Sarah, Marcus said, his voice carefully controlled, I need you to think carefully. Have you posted any photos of Emma online recently? Anywhere public? No, I've been careful about that since we talked about social media security. Sarah's heart was racing now. Marcus, how would a stranger know Emma's name? How would they know what she looks like? The implication hung in the air like smoke. Someone had been watching them closely enough to identify their daughter by name and appearance. Derek stood up abruptly. This is really happening, isn't it? Someone's actually targeting your family. Torres was still on her phone, speaking in rapid, low tones to someone at the FBI operations center. Sarah caught fragments, immediate trace, and escalate to priority status. What do we do? Patricia asked, her voice small and frightened. Marcus was already in motion, his training taking over. We're leaving. Now. Sarah, pack a bag for yourself and Emma. Essentials only. Where are we going? Safe house. Until we know more about who sent that message and how they got your number. Sarah felt reality tilt sideways. This morning she'd been a new mother learning about basic security precautions. Now she was packing to leave her home because someone was directly threatening her family. I'm coming with you, Derek said suddenly. Absolutely not, Marcus replied firmly. The fewer people involved, the better. But if someone's watching Sarah's family, they might target her parents too. Her brother. Derek's voice was intense with worry. I'm not letting my sister and niece face this alone. Torres ended her phone call and rejoined the conversation. The number traces back to a prepaid phone purchased with cash yesterday. No surveillance cameras at the purchase location. No useful information. What about the message itself? Sarah asked. Can you tell where it was sent from? Cell tower triangulation puts it within a 3-mile radius of this neighborhood. Torres's expression was grim, which means whoever sent it is local. Possibly watching this house right now. The words sent a chill through Sarah that had nothing to do with the January weather. Someone could be outside her parents' house at this very moment, observing their emergency family meeting, taking photos, gathering more information for whatever purpose they had in mind. We need to move, Marcus said again. Sarah, 5 minutes. As Sarah hurried upstairs to her old bedroom to pack a bag, her mind was spinning with questions and fears. How had someone gotten her phone number? How did they know Emma's name? What did beautiful family mean? Was it a threat, a taunt, or something else? She was stuffing diapers and baby clothes into a duffel bag when Derek appeared in the doorway. Sarah, I need to tell you something. She looked up from her packing, struck by the serious tone in her brother's voice. I may have screwed up, Derek said quietly. Earlier this week, when I was at the coffee shop near your apartment, some guy started talking to me about the neighborhood. Asked if I lived there, if I knew anything about the families in the building. Sarah's hands stilled on Emma's clothes. What did you tell him? Nothing specific, but... Derek ran a hand through his hair. He asked if I had family in the area, and I said my sister lived nearby. He asked about her husband, what he did for work, whether they had kids. Derek, what exactly did you say? I said you had a beautiful baby daughter named Emma, and that your husband worked for the government. I thought I was being vague enough, but now... Derek's face was pale with realization. Sarah, I think I might have given them the information they used in that text. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. What did this man look like? 30s, maybe. Average height, brown hair, nothing distinctive. He seemed friendly, just making conversation. Derek's voice was thick with guilt. I had no idea I was being played. We have to tell Marcus and Torres, Sarah said, slinging the diaper bag over her shoulder. Right now. They hurried back downstairs, where Marcus was helping Patricia pack a bag of her own. Apparently, the decision had been made to move Sarah's parents to safety as well. Marcus, Sarah called out, Derek has something to tell you. As Derek recounted his conversation at the coffee shop, Sarah watched Marcus's expression grow increasingly grim. Torres was taking notes, asking follow-up questions about the location, the time, anything Derek could remember about the man's appearance. This confirms that they're using social engineering to gather intelligence, Torres said when Derek finished. casual conversations designed to extract specific information. How sophisticated is this operation? Robert asked. More sophisticated than we initially thought, Torres admitted. They're not just conducting surveillance, they're actively engaging with family members to fill in gaps in their intelligence. Marcus's phone rang, and he answered it immediately. Chen? Yes, we received it. Understood. How long? All right. When he hung up, his expression was even more serious than before. What? Sarah demanded. That was my supervisor. 2 other families on their watch list received similar messages today. Same phrasing, same knowledge of personal details they shouldn't have had access to. The scope of the threat was expanding in real time. This wasn't just about Marcus's family anymore. It was about a coordinated effort targeting multiple intelligence assets simultaneously. Are we going to the safe house now? Sarah asked, shifting Emma to her other hip. Yes. And Derek? Marcus turned to Sarah's brother with a measured look. You're coming with us. I thought you said. That was before we knew you'd been approached directly. If they targeted you for information, they might target you again, or use you to get to Sarah and Emma. Derek nodded soberly. Whatever you need me to do. As they prepared to leave her parents' house, Sarah took one last look around the living room where she'd grown up, where Emma had been introduced to her extended family just 3 weeks ago, where Derek had finally apologized for years of cruelty. It seemed impossible that their normal family life could change so dramatically in such a short time. How long will we be in the safe house? She asked Torres as they walked toward the cars. Until we identify and neutralize the threat, Torres replied. Could be days, could be weeks. Sarah strapped Emma into her car seat, grateful that her daughter was too young to understand the upheaval happening around her. Emma's main concern at the moment was the interesting texture of her new teething toy, blissfully unaware that her father's work had made their family a target. Ready? Marcus asked, settling into the driver's seat. Sarah looked back at her parents' house, then at her daughter's peaceful face in the rearview mirror. As ready as I'll ever be. As they drove through the familiar streets of her childhood neighborhood, Sarah found herself studying every car, every pedestrian, every person standing near a window. The paranoia she'd been trying to avoid was settling over her like a heavy coat, but she was beginning to understand that some level of vigilance might be necessary for survival. Behind them, Torres followed in her own vehicle with Sarah's parents, while Derek rode with them, unusually quiet in the passenger seat. Sarah could see him checking the side mirrors obsessively, his earlier fascination with Marcus's work replaced by the sobering reality of what being a target actually meant. The safe house is about 40 minutes away, Marcus said, his eyes constantly moving between the road and the mirrors. It's comfortable, secure, and staffed with agents who specialize in protective operations. How many other families are there? Sarah asked. I don't know yet. Depends on how many assets they've decided to move to safety. Emma had fallen asleep in her car seat, apparently soothed by the motion of the vehicle. Sarah envied her daughter's ability to sleep peacefully while their world was being turned upside down. Marcus, Derek said quietly, can I ask you something? Sure. In your experience, when people target intelligence families like this, what are they usually trying to accomplish? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and Sarah could see him weighing how much truth Derek could handle. Usually one of 3 things, Marcus said finally. Intelligence gathering, finding out what the asset knows and who they work with. Leverage, threatening family members to force cooperation or extract information. Or elimination, removing perceived threats to their operations. And which one do you think this is? Given the sophistication and scope, probably intelligence gathering with the potential for leverage. They're building comprehensive profiles on multiple families, which suggests a long-term operation rather than immediate violence. Sarah felt only marginally reassured. The idea that someone was building a comprehensive profile on her family was terrifying enough, regardless of their ultimate intentions. What kind of profile? She asked. Daily routines, relationships, vulnerabilities, security measures. Anything that could be useful for approach or intimidation. Marcus's voice was matter-of-fact, but Sarah could hear the underlying tension. The fact that they knew Emma's name and had your current phone number suggests they've been watching us for longer than we initially thought. The safe house turned out to be a large, nondescript suburban home in a neighborhood Sarah didn't recognize. From the outside, it looked like any other family residence. Well-maintained lawn, two-car garage, children's toys visible in neighboring yards. But as they pulled into the driveway, Sarah noticed details that marked it as something different. Security cameras cleverly disguised as landscaping lights, reinforced glass in the windows, and the subtle bulk of body armor beneath the polo shirts of the neighbors, who were tending their gardens at 6 p.m. on a Saturday. Agent Torres met them at the front door, having somehow arrived ahead of them despite leaving later. Different route, she explained, noticing Sarah's confusion. Standard procedure when moving protected assets. The interior of the safe house was surprisingly normal. Comfortable furniture, a well-equipped kitchen, children's books and toys scattered around the living room. But Sarah also noticed the reinforced door frames, the communications equipment discreetly placed throughout the rooms, and the fact that all the windows had heavy curtains that were currently drawn. "How many families are staying here?" Patricia asked, looking around nervously. "Right now, just yours, but we're expecting 2 more families later tonight." Torres gestured toward the stairs. "There are 4 bedrooms upstairs, plus a nursery that's already set up for Emma." As they settled into their temporary accommodations, Sarah began to understand the strange suspension of normal life that came with protective custody. Emma needed to be fed and changed, Derek needed something to eat, her parents needed to call work and cancel their weekend plans, but all of it was happening in this surreal environment where federal agents monitored their communications and armed guards patrolled the perimeter. "How long has this place been operational?" Derek asked, clearly fascinated by every detail. "About 3 years, Torres replied. "We maintain several facilities like this for situations exactly like the one we're dealing with now." "Do people ever have to stay here for months?" Torres's pause was telling. "In extreme cases, yes, but we're hoping to resolve this situation much more quickly." Marcus was on his phone in the kitchen, speaking in the kind of urgent, clipped tones that meant something significant was happening. Sarah tried to focus on getting Emma settled in the unfamiliar environment, but she couldn't help straining to hear fragments of his conversation. "Confirmed 3 more approaches today. Pattern suggests coordinated effort. Need to accelerate the timeline." When he finished the call and rejoined them in the living room, his expression was grim. "What's the update?" Torres asked. 7 families total now. 3 more were approached today using the same social engineering tactics Derek experienced. And there's been an escalation. "What kind of escalation?" Sarah's voice came out smaller than she'd intended. "One of the assets, a CIA analyst based in Virginia, found evidence that someone had been inside his house while his family was out. Nothing taken, no obvious surveillance equipment planted, but clear signs that someone had conducted a thorough search." The room went completely silent. Sarah felt her arms tighten protectively around Emma, who was fussing slightly in the unfamiliar surroundings. "Search for what?" Robert asked. "Documents, computer access, anything that might provide insight into current operations or reveal the identities of other assets." Marcus sat down heavily beside Sarah. "This confirms that we're dealing with a professional intelligence operation, not random criminals or terrorists." "You mean like foreign agents?" Derek's voice was hushed with the gravity of what he was suggesting. "Possibly, or domestic extremists with significant training and resources." Marcus looked around the room at Sarah's family. "The point is, whoever's behind this has the capability to conduct sophisticated surveillance and infiltration operations." Torres's phone buzzed, and she stepped away to take the call. Sarah could see her through the kitchen doorway, her posture growing more tense as the conversation continued. "Marcus," Sarah said quietly, "I need to ask you something and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Always." "How dangerous is this? Not theoretically, not in general terms, but specifically for Emma and me. What are the chances that someone is going to try to hurt us?" Marcus studied her face for a long moment, clearly weighing his response carefully. "The chances of direct violence are low," he said finally. "These people want information and leverage. Not martyrs." Hurting families of intelligence assets would bring down massive federal attention and make it much harder for them to operate. But if they feel cornered, if they think their operation is about to be exposed, they might escalate to more desperate measures. Marcus's hand found hers and squeezed gently. Which is why we're here. Which is why we're taking every precaution. Torres returned from her phone call with an expression that made everyone in the room look up expectantly. We have a break in the case, she announced. The prepaid phone that sent the text to Sarah? It was used to contact 2 other numbers today. We traced those calls and one of them went to a known address. Whose address? Marcus asked, already standing. That's classified, but I can tell you that federal agents are conducting a raid as we speak. Torres checked her watch. If we're lucky, we'll have answers within the next few hours. Sarah felt a surge of hope mixed with anxiety. The idea that this nightmare might be resolved quickly was appealing, but she also knew that raids could go wrong, that desperate people made unpredictable choices. What happens if they find what they're looking for? She asked. If we can identify the people behind this operation and determine their objectives, we can assess whether the threat to your families is ongoing or if protective custody can be lifted. And if they don't find what they're looking for, Torres's expression grew more serious. Then we continue protective measures and expand the investigation. As if summoned by the mention of expanding investigations, Torres's phone rang again. This time, her end of the conversation was brief and urgent. The raid is complete, she announced when she hung up. They found surveillance equipment, detailed files on intelligence assets and their families, and evidence of a much larger operation than we initially suspected. Good news or bad news? Derek asked. Both. Good news is that we now have concrete evidence of the threat and some leads to follow. Bad news is that the scope is bigger than we thought, and the people behind it had time to destroy significant amounts of evidence before the agents arrived. Marcus was already reaching for his phone. I need to contact my handler. If this is as big as it sounds, they'll want to debrief me immediately. Actually, Torres said, they want to debrief all of you, tomorrow morning, here at the safe house. The information your family provided about the coffee shop encounter was crucial to identifying one of the targets for today's raid. Derek looked both proud and worried. My conversation with that guy actually helped. It gave us a specific location and time frame that correlated with other intelligence we'd gathered. Sometimes these cases are solved by connecting small pieces of information from multiple sources. As the evening progressed, 2 more families arrived at the safe house, a couple with 2 young children and an older man traveling alone. The house began to feel crowded, but also oddly communal, like a strange kind of summer camp for people whose lives had been disrupted by national security concerns. Sarah found herself in the nursery, rocking Emma to sleep while listening to the quiet conversations drifting up from the living room below. The other mother, Jessica, had introduced herself earlier and offered to share childcare duties if needed. Her husband worked in cybersecurity for the NSA, and this was their second time in protective custody. Does it get easier? Sarah had asked her. You learn to cope, Jessica replied diplomatically, but I can't say it gets easier exactly. You just get better at living with uncertainty. Now, as Sarah settled Emma into the unfamiliar crib, she tried to imagine getting better at living with uncertainty. Emma seemed to be adapting more easily than any of the adults. She'd taken her bottle without fuss, had been charmed by the new faces and voices, and was now sleeping peacefully, despite being in a completely different environment than she'd known for her entire 3-month life. She's resilient, Marcus said softly from the doorway. She has to be, doesn't she, given what our life is apparently going to be like. Marcus entered the nursery and stood beside the crib, watching their daughter sleep. Sarah, I've been thinking about something Agent Torres said earlier, about people in my position requesting transfers to lower-risk assignments. Sarah felt her heart skip. Marcus, no, we talked about this. That was before someone started building files on our family, before strangers were texting you about Emma, before we had to leave our home and move to a safe house. And my answer is still the same. Sarah kept her voice low to avoid waking Emma, but her tone was firm. You're good at what you do, you save lives. I'm not gonna let some criminals force you to abandon work that matters, even if it means Emma grows up with this kind of disruption as normal. Sarah looked down at their sleeping daughter, so small and vulnerable and trusting. The idea of Emma experiencing this kind of fear and upheaval regularly was heartbreaking. But the alternative, Marcus giving up work that could prevent terrorist attacks or save lives, seemed equally wrong. "Do you remember what you told Derek at Christmas?" Sarah asked. "About being the kind of man who loves his family enough to do a job that keeps them safe?" "I remember." "That's still true. The work you do protects families like ours from people who would hurt them. If we let these criminals intimidate us into changing course, then they win." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his hand resting gently on the crib rail. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. As long as we're together, as long as we're honest with each other about the risks and the precautions, I can handle the uncertainty. Even if it means more nights like this, more safe houses, more security briefings, more watching over our shoulders." Sarah considered the question seriously. The past week had been exhausting and frightening in ways she'd never experienced before, but it had also shown her something important about her own strength and about their relationship. "Marcus, 3 months ago I was just a new mother trying to figure out how to balance a baby with part-time work. Today I'm in a federal safe house because my husband's work makes our family a target for international criminals." Sarah smiled slightly. "If I can adapt to that, I can adapt to whatever comes next." Marcus leaned over the crib to kiss Emma's forehead gently, then pulled Sarah into his arms. "I love you, both of you, more than I thought it was possible to love anything. We love you too, and we're going to be okay, whatever happens next." They stood together in the quiet nursery, holding each other while their daughter slept peacefully nearby, and for a moment, the safe house felt like home. Not because of the location or the circumstances, but because they were together and they were facing the challenges as a team. A soft knock on the door interrupted their moment of peace. Torres stood in the hallway, her expression apologetic but urgent. "I'm sorry to disturb you, but we just received word from the raid team. They found something that changes our assessment of the situation significantly." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "Changes it how?" "Can we talk downstairs? Your parents and Derek should hear this too." As they gathered in the living room with the other families, Sarah noticed that everyone looked tense and expectant. Whatever Torres was about to tell them was clearly significant enough to warrant briefing all the protected assets at once. The raid tonight recovered extensive surveillance files on more than 30 intelligence assets and their families, Torres began. But more importantly, they found evidence that this operation has foreign backing and sophisticated technical support. "What kind of foreign backing?" the NSA cybersecurity specialist asked. "We're still analyzing the evidence, but preliminary assessment suggests a state-sponsored intelligence operation with significant resources and long-term objectives." Sarah felt the bottom drop out of her world. State-sponsored meant this wasn't a criminal enterprise or a terrorist cell. It was a foreign government targeting American intelligence assets and their families. "Which state?" Marcus asked, his voice carefully controlled. "That's still classified, but I can tell you that this complicates the security picture significantly. We're not dealing with a finite criminal operation that can be rolled up with a few arrests. This is an ongoing intelligence war, and your families are caught in the middle of it." The room was silent except for the soft sound of one of the other children playing with toys in the corner. Sarah looked around at the faces of the other families, people who, like her, had probably never imagined their lives would intersect with international espionage. "What does this mean for our families?" Jessica asked the question everyone was thinking. "It means enhanced security measures for the foreseeable future. It means being more vigilant about operational security. And it means that some of you may need to consider more permanent changes to your living situations." "Permanent changes like what?" Derek's voice was sharp with concern. "Relocation, new identities in extreme cases, enhanced protective details." Torres looked around the room. "I want to be clear. These are options, not requirements. But given the sophistication and resources of the threat we're facing, some families may decide that their current lifestyle is no longer sustainable." Sarah felt Marcus tense beside her. This was exactly the conversation he'd been dreading, the moment when his work would force his family to choose between safety and the life they'd built together. "How soon do we need to make these decisions?" Sarah asked. We'll have a clearer picture of the threat assessment within the next few days. After that, we'll work with each family individually to determine the best path forward." As the briefing ended and the families dispersed to their rooms, Sarah found herself facing the possibility that everything they'd built together, their apartment, their neighborhood, their connection to her family, might need to be sacrificed for their safety. But as she looked at Emma sleeping peacefully in the portable crib, and at Marcus's determined expression as he reviewed security protocols on his phone, she realized that home wasn't really about any of those external things. Home was the three of them together, whatever form that took. The challenge would be figuring out how to build a life where Emma could grow up feeling safe and loved, while acknowledging that their family would always be a target for people who saw them as a means to an end. 3 days into their stay at the safe house, Sarah woke to the sound of urgent voices in the hallway outside their bedroom. Marcus was already gone from bed, and through the thin walls she could hear him speaking in the kind of rapid, clipped tones that meant something serious was happening. Emma was still sleeping in the portable crib beside the bed, undisturbed by the commotion. Sarah slipped out of bed and crept to the door, trying to make out the conversation without waking her daughter. Confirmed breach at the Virginia location, 3 families compromised. Need to move everyone now. Sarah's blood went cold. She quickly threw on clothes and was preparing to wake Emma when Marcus appeared in the doorway, already dressed and carrying their emergency bag. "What's happening?" Sarah whispered. The safe house in Virginia was compromised. Someone got inside and planted surveillance equipment before the families were evacuated. Marcus's voice was grim but controlled. "We're moving to a secondary location immediately." "How is that possible? I thought these places were secure." "So did we, which means we're dealing with people who have inside information about federal protective operations." The implication hit Sarah like a physical blow. Someone within the FBI or CIA was providing information to the people targeting intelligence families. The safe house system itself had been compromised. Emma stirred as Sarah lifted her from the crib, blinking sleepily but not crying. At 3.5 months old, Emma was becoming disturbingly adaptable to sudden disruptions in new environments. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked as she quickly packed Emma's things. "I don't know yet. Torres is coordinating with multiple agencies to find a location that hasn't been compromised." Within 20 minutes, all the families were loaded into a convoy of unmarked vehicles, leaving behind the suburban safe house that had felt secure just hours earlier. Sarah found herself in the back seat of an SUV with Emma, while Marcus rode in the front passenger seat and an FBI agent she'd never seen before drove through the pre-dawn darkness. "Mrs. Chen," the driver said, glancing at her in the rearview mirror, "I'm Agent Rodriguez. I want you to know that we're taking you to a location that's not part of the standard safe house network. It should be completely secure." "What kind of location?" Sarah asked, bouncing Emma gently as their daughter began to fuss. "Military facility," Marcus answered. "Higher security, more isolation, but also more restrictions on movement and communication." The drive took nearly 2 hours, during which Sarah watched the landscape change, from suburban neighborhoods to rural farmland to dense forest. Emma had fallen back asleep in her car seat, apparently unbothered by the constant motion and change of environment. When they finally arrived at their destination, Sarah was surprised to see what looked like a summer camp or retreat center, rustic buildings scattered among tall trees, with a lake visible in the distance. But as they drove through the main gate, she noticed the discreet security cameras, the subtle barriers, and the fact that their driver had to provide multiple forms of identification before being allowed entry. "Welcome to Camp David's Little Sister," Agent Rodriguez said with a slight smile. "Officially, this is a government employee retreat center. Unofficially, it's where we bring people who need to disappear for a while." The main lodge was comfortable but clearly institutional. Heavy wooden furniture, stone fireplaces, and the kind of sturdy construction that suggested it had been built with security rather than aesthetics in mind. Sarah and Marcus were assigned a small cabin about 50 yards from the main building, with Derek and her parents in another cabin nearby. "How long will we be here?" Sarah asked Torres as they settled into their new accommodations. "Until we can identify and neutralize the source of the security breach," Torres replied. "Could be days, could be weeks." The reality of their situation was becoming clearer. This wasn't a temporary disruption anymore. It was a fundamental change in how they would need to live their lives. Emma would spend the formative months of her infancy in hiding, surrounded by federal agents and security measures. "Torres," Marcus said, "I need to know what the intelligence assessment is showing. How sophisticated is this operation, and what are their ultimate objectives?" Torres hesitated, glancing at Sarah before responding. "Based on the evidence we've recovered, we believe this is a long-term intelligence operation designed to identify and compromise American assets. The goal appears to be building a network of leverage points that could be activated during a crisis or conflict." "Leverage points meaning us," Sarah said. "Meaning the families of intelligence personnel, yes. The theory is that by gathering detailed information on family members, routines, vulnerabilities, emotional attachments, they create the ability to influence or control assets through threats to people they care about." Sarah felt sick. "So we're not just targets, we're weapons they want to use against our own country." "That's a simplified but accurate assessment," Torres agreed, "which is why the security breach is so concerning. If they have inside information about protective operations, they can anticipate our moves and potentially compromise other families." Emma had woken up and was beginning to demand attention. As Sarah prepared a bottle, she found herself thinking about her daughter's future in entirely new terms. Emma wasn't just growing up with an unusual family situation. She was growing up as a potential national security asset herself. "How many other families are dealing with this?" Derek asked. He'd been unusually quiet during the move, clearly processing the escalating seriousness of their situation. "Classified information," Torres replied automatically, then seemed to reconsider. "But I can tell you that you're not alone. There are families all over the country who live with these kinds of security concerns. And they just adapt, accept that this is their life now?" "Most of them, yes. Because the alternative is that their spouses give up work that's critical to national security." Sarah looked at Marcus, who was staring out the cabin window at the peaceful forest surrounding their temporary refuge. She could see the tension in his shoulders, the weight of responsibility that came with knowing his career choices had put his family in danger. "Marcus," she said quietly, "what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that Torres is right about this being a long-term situation. And I'm thinking about what that means for Emma's childhood, for your career, for our relationship with your family, and—" Marcus turned from the window, his expression serious but resolved. "And I'm thinking that we need to make some fundamental decisions about how we want to live our lives." Before Sarah could respond, Torres's radio crackled with an urgent message. She stepped away to respond, speaking in low tones that Sarah couldn't quite make out. When Torres returned, her expression was grim. "We have a problem. The intelligence operation targeting your families? It's bigger than we thought. Much bigger." "How much bigger?" Marcus asked. "We've identified similar operations targeting intelligence assets in at least 12 other countries. This isn't just about American intelligence. It's part of a coordinated international effort to compromise Western intelligence capabilities." The scope of what they were dealing with was expanding faster than Sarah could process. What had started as a personal security concern was revealing itself to be part of a global intelligence war. "What does that mean for us specifically?" Sarah asked. "It means the resources behind this operation are virtually unlimited. It means they have the capability to sustain surveillance and targeting operations indefinitely. And it means that traditional protective measures may not be sufficient." Emma had finished her bottle and was gazing up at Sarah with the trusting expression that never failed to break her heart. Her daughter had no idea that her very existence made her a target for international criminals. "Torres," Marcus said carefully, "are you telling us that we need to consider permanent relocation, new identities?" "I'm telling you that all options are on the table. The threat assessment has changed significantly in the past 72 hours. Sarah felt the walls of their temporary refuge closing in around her. The idea of giving up not just their apartment and their neighborhood, but their very identities, was almost incomprehensible. "How would that work?" Derek asked. "I mean, practically speaking. Complete background reconstruction, new names, new histories, new locations. Sarah would need to give up her writing career, Marcus would be transferred to a different kind of assignment. You would all need to cut contact with extended family and friends." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah looked around at her family. Her parents, who had just reconnected with their granddaughter after years of distance. Derek, who was finally building a positive relationship with his sister. Marcus, whose entire career was built on the relationships and expertise he'd developed over more than a decade. "That's not living," Patricia said quietly. "That's just existing." "It's survival," Torres corrected gently. "For families facing this level of threat, sometimes survival is the best option available." "And if we don't accept relocation?" Sarah asked. "If we decide to stay and fight?" Torres's expression grew more serious. "Then we implement maximum security protocols. Armed protective details, restricted movement, constant surveillance. Emma would grow up essentially in protective custody." Neither option seemed acceptable. Give up everything they were and everyone they loved, or live like prisoners in their own country. "How long do we have to decide?" Marcus asked. "The threat assessment will be complete within 48 hours. After that, we'll need a decision from each family about how to proceed." As Torres left them alone in their cabin, Sarah found herself staring at use, varied descriptions like her daughter's calm expression, and wondering what kind of world they were bringing their daughter up in. A world where loving the wrong person could make you a target. Where having a parent in intelligence work could cost you your identity, your family, your entire life. "Sarah," Marcus said softly, "I want you to know that whatever we decide, I support it completely. If you want me to request a transfer to non-classified work, if you want us to take new identities and disappear, if you want to stay and fight, whatever you think is best for Emma, that's what we'll do." Sarah looked at her husband, this man who had dedicated his life to protecting people he'd never meet, who was now being forced to choose between his duty to his country and his duty to his family. "What do you want to do?" she asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I want to keep doing work that matters. I want Emma to grow up knowing her grandparents and her uncle. I want you to be able to pursue your writing career. And I want all of that to be possible without putting any of you in danger. And since we can't have all of that, I want to choose the option that gives Emma the best chance at a normal, happy life." It was the question that would define their family's future. What constituted a normal, happy life for a child whose father's work made her a target for international criminals? As evening fell over their forest refuge, Sarah found herself walking to the lake with Emma in her arms, trying to imagine different versions of their future. Emma was fascinated by the water, reaching toward it with her tiny hands and making soft cooing sounds. "What do you think, baby girl?" Sarah murmured. "Do we disappear and start over somewhere new? Do we stay and fight and live with bodyguards? Or do we find some third option that nobody's thought of yet?" Emma's response was to grab a handful of Sarah's hair and pull it toward her mouth, apparently more interested in the texture than in the philosophical implications of their situation. "I know you can't answer," Sarah continued, "but someday you'll be old enough to understand what happened here. And I want to make sure that when that day comes, you're proud of the choices we made." Marcus appeared beside them, having followed her down to the lake. He put his arm around Sarah's shoulders and gazed out at the peaceful water, so at odds with the chaos surrounding their lives. "I've been thinking," he said quietly. "About what?" "About what Torres said earlier, about this being part of a larger international operation. What about it? If that's true, then running away doesn't really solve the problem. New identities might keep us safe temporarily, but they don't eliminate the threat. The people behind this operation will still be out there, targeting other families." Sarah turned to look at her husband's profile in the fading light. "You want to stay and fight. I want to stay and help end this, not just for us, but for all the families dealing with this threat. Even if it means Emma grows up with security details and restricted movement? Even then. Because the alternative is Emma growing up as someone else, cut off from her family, never knowing her real history or understanding why her parents gave up everything that mattered to them." Sarah considered this perspective as Emma dozed against her shoulder. There was something appealing about the idea of fighting back rather than simply hiding. But there was also something terrifying about voluntarily choosing the more dangerous path. How would we fight back? She asked. I'd work with Torres and the Joint Task Force to identify and neutralize the network targeting intelligence families. You'd help by being part of the bait. Bait? Marcus's expression was serious but determined. If we go back to a modified version of our normal life, carefully monitored, heavily protected, but visible, we might be able to draw out the people behind this operation. Force them to make moves that expose their capabilities and objectives. The idea was both terrifying and oddly empowering. Instead of being passive victims, they would become active participants in stopping the people who had disrupted their lives. What would that look like practically? We'd return to the city, to an apartment with enhanced security. I'd continue my work with the Joint Task Force, but from a domestic base. You'd resume some of your normal activities. Writing, taking Emma to the park, visiting your family, but always with protective surveillance. For how long? Until we catch them. Until we dismantle their operation and eliminate the threat to intelligence families. Sarah looked down at Emma's sleeping face, then out at the lake where the last light of day was reflecting off the calm water. It seemed impossible that such a peaceful place could be the setting for making decisions about international espionage and family safety. If we do this, she said slowly, if we choose to stay and fight, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me that Emma's safety comes first. Before the mission, before national security, before everything else. If there comes a moment when we have to choose between catching the bad guys and keeping our daughter safe, we choose Emma. Marcus didn't hesitate. I promise. Emma's safety is the priority, always. As they walked back toward their cabin, Sarah felt a sense of resolution settling over her. The choice between running and fighting wasn't really a choice at all. It was a question of what kind of people they wanted to be, what kind of world they wanted Emma to grow up in. Marcus, she said as they reached their door, let's go catch some bad guys. Marcus smiled, the first genuinely happy expression she'd seen from him in days. Are you sure? I'm sure. But first, let's go tell my family what we've decided. They deserve to know what they're signing up for. Inside their cabin, Derek was reading while her parents played cards at the small dining table. They all looked up expectantly as Sarah and Marcus entered with Emma. We've made a decision, Sarah announced. We're going back to the city. We're going to help catch the people behind this operation. The room was quiet for a moment as her family absorbed this information. Is that safe? Patricia asked, her voice tight with worry. Safer than running and hiding for the rest of our lives, Sarah replied, and more likely to actually solve the problem. Robert leaned back in his chair, his military bearing evident as he considered their choice. What do you need from us? We need you to understand that this means continued security measures. Restricted communication, limited social media, awareness of surroundings. Basically, an indefinite extension of everything we've been doing for the past week. And if something goes wrong? Derek asked quietly. Marcus and Sarah exchanged glances. It was the question they'd been avoiding. The possibility that their choice to fight back could result in tragedy. If something goes wrong, Marcus said carefully, we'll have the full resources of multiple federal agencies backing us up. The risk is real, but it's calculated risk with maximum protection. Derek nodded slowly. Then let's do it. Let's catch these bastards. Patricia reached out to touch Emma's hand gently. She's going to grow up knowing that her family doesn't back down from bullies. That's the plan, Sarah agreed, feeling more confident about their decision with each passing moment. As they spent their last evening at the forest retreat, Sarah found herself looking forward to returning to something resembling normal life. It wouldn't be the same normal they'd known before. There would be security measures and restrictions, and constant awareness of potential threats. But it would be their life, lived on their terms, in service of something larger than themselves. Emma slept peacefully in her portable crib, unaware that her parents had just committed their family to playing a role in an international intelligence operation. But someday, when she was old enough to understand, Sarah hoped Emma would be proud of the choice they'd made to fight rather than flee. 6 weeks later, Sarah was beginning to think they'd made a terrible mistake. The enhanced security apartment Torres had arranged for them was comfortable enough, larger than their previous place, in a good neighborhood, with all the latest protective technology seamlessly integrated into the living space. But it was also essentially a high-tech prison, surrounded by undercover agents and monitored so thoroughly that Sarah sometimes felt like she was living in a reality TV show. More troubling was the fact that the operation to catch the people targeting intelligence families had produced minimal results. Despite their family serving as monitored bait for 6 weeks, the surveillance network had gone completely dark. No more threatening texts, no more social engineering attempts, no more mysterious strangers asking probing questions. It was as if the entire operation had simply vanished. "They're being patient," Marcus explained during one of their weekly security briefings with Torres. "Professional intelligence operatives know how to wait. They'll surface again when they think we've lowered our guard." But Sarah was beginning to wonder if they would ever lower their guard. Emma was now almost 5 months old, and her entire conscious existence had been shaped by security protocols. She'd never been to a regular playground, never had a babysitter who wasn't federally vetted, never experienced the simple pleasure of a spontaneous family outing. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon when Sarah attempted to take Emma for a walk in the nearby park. What should have been a simple 20-minute stroll turned into a coordinated operation involving 3 undercover agents, a swept route, and constant radio communication. By the time they returned to the apartment, Sarah felt more like a protected witness than a mother. "This isn't working," she told Marcus that evening, as they watched Emma practice rolling over on her playmat. "We're not catching anyone, and we're not living. We're just existing in this weird limbo." Marcus looked up from the classified briefing documents he'd been reviewing. "Torres thinks they're planning something bigger. The silence could mean they're regrouping for a major operation. Or it could mean they've moved on to other targets and we're wasting our lives sitting here waiting for something that's never going to happen." Before Marcus could respond, his secure phone buzzed with an urgent message. As he read it, his expression grew increasingly grave. "What is it?" Sarah asked. "There's been a development, a major one." Marcus was already reaching for his jacket. "I need to go to the field office immediately." "What kind of development?" "The kind that changes everything." 3 hours later, Marcus returned with Torres and 2 other agents Sarah had never seen before. Their expressions were a mixture of excitement and apprehension that immediately put Sarah on high alert. "Mrs. Chen," one of the new agents said, "we need to discuss a significant breakthrough in the case. But first, I need to ask, are you prepared to take a more active role in the operation?" Sarah looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. "What kind of active role?" "We've identified the location of the operations command center," Torres explained, "and we believe your family, specifically Emma, is the key to getting inside." The words sent a chill through Sarah that had nothing to do with the February weather outside their secure apartment. "You want to use my daughter as bait?" "We want to use the appearance of your daughter as bait," the agent corrected. "The plan would involve creating a situation where the targets believe they have an opportunity to gather intelligence on Emma's routine. But instead of actual intelligence, they would be fed carefully controlled information designed to lead them into a trap." Sarah felt her protective instincts flare. "Absolutely not. I won't put Emma at risk for any operation." "She wouldn't be at risk," Marcus said quietly. "The plan involves using a decoy, someone who looks like Emma from a distance but isn't actually her." "A decoy, baby?" Sarah's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. "Are you hearing yourselves?" "Sarah," Torres said gently, "this could be our only chance to end this threat permanently. If we can capture the operational leadership, we can dismantle the entire network and give your family, and dozens of other families, their lives back." The room fell silent, except for Emma's contented gurgling as she played with her stuffed rabbit. Sarah looked at her daughter's innocent face and tried to imagine explaining this decision to her someday. How do you tell your child that when she was 5 months old, her parents used her as inspiration for a federal sting operation? "I need details," Sarah said finally. "Everything. I want to know exactly what this plan involves and what the risks are." Over the next hour, the agents outlined an operation that was both elegant and terrifying in its complexity. The plan involved Sarah following her normal routine with what appeared to be Emma, but was actually a sophisticated decoy designed to fool surveillance from a distance. The real Emma would be safely secured with Derek and Sarah's parents at an undisclosed location. The goal was to lead the surveillance team to a predetermined location where federal agents could capture them and extract information about the broader network. It was the kind of operation that could either end their nightmare or escalate it to a level they'd never imagined. "What are the chances of success?" Sarah asked. "Based on the intelligence we've gathered, approximately 70%, one of the agents replied. "And the chances that something goes wrong and we end up in more danger than we're already in?" The agents exchanged glances. "Approximately 30%. Sarah looked at Marcus, who was watching her with an expression of complete trust in whatever decision she made. This was her choice: risk everything for a chance at freedom, or continue living in their secure but constrained existence indefinitely. "When would this happen?" she asked. "Tomorrow." The timeline was breathtakingly fast, designed to prevent the targets from detecting any changes in routine that might tip them off. If Sarah agreed, she would spend the next 24 hours preparing for an operation that would either restore their normal life or destroy it completely. As the agents left to finalize operational details, Sarah found herself alone with Marcus and Emma in their secure apartment, facing the most important decision of their lives. "What do you think?" Marcus asked. Sarah picked up Emma, holding her daughter close and breathing in her sweet baby scent. In just a few months, Emma had become the center of their universe, the person for whom every decision was made and every sacrifice was justified. "I think," Sarah said slowly, "that I want Emma to grow up in a world where she can walk to the park without a federal escort, where her parents aren't always looking over their shoulders, where being part of our family doesn't make her a target. So we do it?" Sarah looked out the window at the street below, where she knew undercover agents were maintaining their constant vigil. Then she looked at Emma's trusting face, at Marcus's determined expression, at the life they'd built together despite impossible circumstances. "We do it," she said firmly. "Tomorrow we end this." As they prepared for what could be their last night in protective custody, Sarah felt a mixture of terror and hope that she'd never experienced before. The next morning came faster than expected. Sarah followed the plan perfectly, walking through the park with the decoy while federal agents tracked every movement. At 2:47 p.m., Torres's voice crackled through her earpiece. "We have them, all targets in custody." The surveillance network that had terrorized intelligence families for months was finally broken. Within hours, the arrests led to a broader international operation that dismantled similar networks in 12 countries. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in their old neighborhood park, watching Emma reach for butterflies with genuine wonder. No hidden agents, no security protocols, no fear. Just a mother and daughter, enjoying a sunny afternoon. Marcus appeared beside them, his phone silent for the first time in months. "It's over," he said simply. "Really over." Emma babbled happily at a passing dog, completely oblivious to the fact that her family had just helped win a small victory in a much larger war. And for the first time since Christmas, Sarah felt like they could finally begin living their normal, extraordinary life together. Thank you for joining this incredible journey. Please like, subscribe, and share for more amazing stories.